In this episode, I'm going to talk with Jenifer Cannon from Pax Mutual Funds. She works with the Pax Ellevate Global Women's Leadership Mutual Fund. This is Impact Financial Planners, making sustainable, responsible impact investing easy for socially conscious investors who want to make a positive change through their investments. Impact Financial Planners is a fee-only financial planning firm specializing in sustainable, responsible impact investing at impactfinancialplanners.com. All right, thank you for joining me on this episode. I'm going to have an interview with Jenifer Cannon. She's the Vice President of Business Development at Impax Asset Management, and I guess they merged with Pax Mutual Funds, and she works on the Pax Ellevate Global Women's Leadership Mutual Fund. She helps financial advisors build their practices by expanding their relationships with female clients. She's been in the financial industry since 1994 and worked with Fidelity, Putnam, Schwab, Boston Foundation, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. She has quite a bit of experience. All right, let's go to the interview. All right, Jenifer, thanks for joining us here on Impact Financial Planners. I guess, could you describe a little bit? I know Pax has about 12 funds. You're involved with the Pax Ellevate Global Women's Leadership Fund. Could you describe its strategy, how that fund works?
Sure, Bill. The Pax Ellevate Fund has been around for about a little over 5 years. Our anniversary was last month. And it was founded on the principle that gender diversity plays a critical role in business success over time, and that investors in these companies that advance women actually can do well. And we have multiple studies, actually over 60 studies on our site that shows that. And so what we set out to do with this fund is really show in real time that by investing in these companies, we would be able to outperform the indices that we were going against. And so it's a broadly diversified mutual fund that invests in the highest rated companies in the world for advancing women through gender diversity on their boards and executive management. We refer to it as a sort of a smart beta strategy where the factor is gender. It's an optimized index fund, and the index that we use is the MSCI World. So we take all the companies in the MSCI World and we rate them with our proprietary gender score. And then with that, we take the top 400 of those companies, invest in them. So that's sort of an overview of what the fund is. When we started about 5 years ago, people thought we were a little crazy with this idea, but you've seen tremendous growth within the industry on gender lens investing. And we're proud that we were the pioneer, the first fund to do this, the oldest fund and now the largest fund.
Yeah, actually, could you comment just a little bit about, I mean, Pax has been around a long time, have several funds in different areas. I know you're focused on the Ellevate Women's, but they've been doing or been involved in this ESG SRI world for quite a bit.
You're right, Bill. So Pax World started in 1971 with the very first socially responsible fund, which is what they called it back then. It was actually two ministers that were protesting the Vietnam War got together and said, I want to find a way to align my values with my investing. And a concept back then was completely unknown, and we launched this. And so if you look at our suite of funds, and we manage about 17 billion in assets now because we merged with an organization called Impax Asset Management based out of London about a year and a half ago. And so we have 12 strategies in the US, and then we have some other strategies in Europe. But if you look at our 12 strategies in the US, where all of those funds are using an ESG screen. And the two themes that we really focus on as an organization in terms of the issues we want to move the needle on are obviously gender inequality issues. And then the second one is really around environmental issues. And so We have a fund that focuses on investing in companies that are finding solutions for a more sustainable environment. And then we engage with companies around environmental issues so that they're preparing themselves for what this changing economy is going to look like, what climate change means for an organization, all of those key issues. So you're exactly right. We've been around since 1971. We're a pioneer in the space, and we have about 12 different strategies.
Great. And so with this Elevate Women's Leadership Fund, you're focusing on women leadership, but then is that overlaid with the ESG screening or other screens as well?
Exactly right. So all of our funds at Pax, as I mentioned, or we call ourselves Impax now, have an ESG screen. And so if you look at our process for this fund, we start with all of the companies in the MSCI world, and we immediately apply an ESG screen and take out the laggards. There's two really key issues that we don't invest in terms of companies that are involved in tobacco or in firearms, and that's both making the firearms as well as distributing them. So we are removing the laggards from an ESG screen, and with that, we're left with those holdings. Then we will apply our Impax gender score so that would drive the top 400.
Gotcha. How about could you describe a little bit about the balance of the Global Women's Fund? How much is in US? Is it mostly large cap? What's the distribution of the fund? Where would it fit in a portfolio?
Well, we call it a global large cap equity, and I'll give you the exact breakdown so that you have them. But it's obviously, if you look at the MSCI world, we're trying to sort of track closely to that. So I think the exact number for the US portion is 68%. Europe and the Middle East is 24%. And then if you look at the Pacific, that's where you see a difference between the actual index, and we're invested at about 4.4%. And one of the challenges that you see with Pacific is Japan. And unfortunately, if you look at Japan at this point in time, you don't see a representation of women in leadership or on boards of directors in these organizations. And so because of this, we have very little exposure there.
So you're trailing what the index has in Asia quite a bit?
I would say we're not trailing. I would say we're underweighted than the index because of the fact that when you factor in gender for these organizations, they just don't have it there. But I'm optimistic that will change.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And then so screening is a part. How about corporate engagement? What's your process for engaging with the companies that you hold?
So, Bill, engagement is everything to us. We've been engaging on gender way before we even launched this fund because we feel if you look at gender inequality across the world, it looks different everywhere, but it's a major human rights issue. And so we've chosen to use that as shareholders as a platform to really educate companies as well as sort of push them to make some changes so that there's more gender equality. And so if you look at our engagement work around gender, it really kind of falls into two buckets. The first is as shareholders looking at board diversity. And so since about 2010, we've voted down over 1,200 all-male board slates, and that's really across all of our strategies domestically. And we've filed multiple petitions with organizations that have all-male board slates. And when we vote that down, we do offer them the opportunity to talk about why we voted that down and to have a conversation about what best practices are and why we think it's so important to have a structure in place that allows for board diversity. But it can take a while. I look at an organization like Roper Technologies. When we first voted down their all-male board slate, they were looking for ways to transition to a more diverse board. And we had ongoing conversations, and multiple years later they were able to have, I believe it was 3 women on the board and growing. So those are the type of conversations that we have. It doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing one. The other issue when you look at gender inequality in terms of our engagement is on pay equity. Pay equity is really important, and what we do is we reach out to companies and really nicely encourage them to do pay equity assessments. And we hear more and more about that in the news now, but when we began these conversations with organizations, some of the largest organizations in the world, that really wasn't a conversation that they'd been having. And so we did get some pushback saying, you know, why is this your business? Why should we be doing this? What's the value of this? But then you see some organizations that really have led the way, whether it's Apple or Amazon or others, that have done pay equity assessments and then have taken it one step further. And what we like to see is actually publish those results. Because when you shine a light on those results, what happens? You have to start to make change because people are watching. And so that is the other issue that we're really advocating for and engaging with companies around. So some of that, or quite a bit of that, is education from the very beginning about how to do that, why we were looking for them to do it. And you've seen just tremendous results for companies that have done it. That have seen those gaps, fixed those gaps, and made the commitment to do ongoing assessments.
And your process is just, if you own shares, you're engaging with that company, hoping that that'll be it. And if they don't make changes or don't publish results, do you, I don't know, push them further with the resolution? I'm not sure what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't want to have, you know, obviously we don't want to get to the point where we have to show up at a shareholder meeting. That's sort of the last step. But if an organization, and very few are not willing to engage. So if an organization is not willing to engage, then we will attend a shareholder meeting and then present on why we think this is very important. And that's happened twice in the last couple of years. And the organization that we've gone to has been Oracle, and where we've each year seen more of the independent shareholders interested in this, but we still haven't gotten to the place where we want to be.
Does that, once you bring up a shareholder resolution, then do you have to reach out to other shareholders to get support? Or is that pretty?
We're at the shareholder meeting. So when they hold their yearly shareholder meeting, and this would happen to be in November, you know, you have a lot of them that are there and listening. But again, that's very rare. Most companies are willing to engage and willing to have a conversation. And our expectations are not that it happens overnight. We understand that it's a process. Going into a pay equity assessment is a big deal. And it takes time to structure how that assessment is going to occur, to actually do the assessment, and then to analyze the results.
Great. I've noticed that the last, especially 5 years, you've had really outperforming, I guess you've been outperforming the index. Do you have any, is there a reason? Do you know why that is happening?
Well, that 5-year number is unique. We had a gender lens strategy prior to the launch of this fund in 2014. We purchased an actively managed strategy, which was very different from what we have right now. And so the 5-year number that you're seeing still reflects, I think, 1 year of that strategy. But in 2014, when we relaunched this, we've had excellent performance. We've been really pleased with our ability to perform, and that when you look at the actual performance, what is so interesting and exciting for all of us to see is that the gender leaders, so the top gender leaders in this portfolio, are the ones that are driving performance. We call it the gender attribution, and we take a look at that on a regular basis, and you consistently see how it's proving out real time all of the studies that we researched and that have been published about how companies that have more diverse leadership teams perform better in multiple different ways. So that's why we feel that the fund has done well, and
It's
we're
really
thrilled.
because of the gender lens that you're putting on it.
Exactly. That's what's driving
Right.
the performance for the most part.
Do you see that the gender lens is changing? I guess getting you off of the index at all. Do you see that you're not over or underweighted in certain industries? I was just thinking of some industries that maybe don't have a lot of gender diversity, or are you pretty well diversified in all the sectors?
No, there's some areas where we're overweighted and some areas where we're underweighted. I'll give you some examples. So if you look at like energy and materials, we tend to be underweighted in that. Some of the technology companies, so we refer to them as communication services, we're underweighted. And then one that people are always really surprised to see is in healthcare. And that's where you just see a lack of women in leadership positions. I think that's changing, but we haven't seen them. And again, we look at these companies on an ongoing basis, but once a year in November is when we do what we call our reconstitution. And that's when we do a deep dive and re-rate all of these companies. And so during that time period, you'll see these sector weights change a little bit depending on the success and what's happening within the industry. But that's where we tend to be a little underweighted just because of the lack of women represented in leadership. But you look at companies like utilities, and we actually are overweighted because it's funny, it's fascinating to look at utilities that have women represented on their boards and in leadership positions across the sort of the sector. So you're exactly right. You see some underweighting in various sectors, similar to what I was saying about Japan, where you just don't have a great
Right.
pool to pick from, and then some overweighting in some areas.
That's surprising though. Yeah, I wouldn't guess that healthcare would be an underweighted situation, but or
Everyone
utility.
says that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone says that. And I think some of it is pharmaceutical within the healthcare field.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, I guess. I guess. Super. Well, anything else you want to add? Where can people get more information?
So please feel free to, go on to the Pax Ellevate website, which you can actually, if you go onto the Pax World website, that's the name of our mutual fund family within the Impax company. We have a ton of resources on there. My favorite thing is a video that you can find on the Pax Ellevate page that says, basically investing like a feminist. And what
Yeah,
does that look like? Have you seen that, Bill?
yeah.
It's pretty powerful. And so for even the biggest sort of cynics out there that are sort of questioning what this means and is this a niche, they enjoy taking a look at that. And then for those of you who are more analytical, we have, like I said, I think over 60 different studies from multiple different highly respected organizations on the benefit of having gender diversity in leadership teams. So I would encourage you to check that out. As well as, on our social media pages, we're constantly sharing content as well that would allow them to take a deeper look and sort of know about the space. I would just finish with one thing, Bill. You probably know this just because of your expertise in the ESG field and being so tied in, but the growth of gender-led investing has been absolutely amazing. If you look back in 2014, and this was data that was published about a year ago, there was about 100 million invested with a gender mandate. And then as if you look at the data that was published about June of 2018, there was over 2.5 billion invested.
Great. Oh, that's wonderful. That's
It's
great that it's
great.
getting a lot of attention.
It
Um,
is. And it's
yeah,
moving the needle, which is what we all want, right?
definitely. No, that's super. I will put a link in our show notes, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Bill. Have a nice day.
You too. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for listening to Impact Financial Planners. Just remember that this podcast is for informational use only. We're not making any investment recommendations. You should definitely read prospectuses and discuss it with your financial advisor before investing. All right, this is brought to you by Impact Financial Planners. If you need help with any part of your finances, please contact Impact Financial Planners for a free meeting, impactfinancialplanners.com. We also have a free informational ebook about sustainable, responsible impact investing at impactfinancialplanners.com/SRI ebook. As always, I appreciate your feedback. Please reach out, contact us, leave a comment. I'll respond in person to any comments that you leave. You can email, call, Facebook, Twitter, any way you want to get in touch with us. I appreciate it. And if you like these impact investing, podcasts or YouTube's videos, please subscribe. Please leave a review. All right. Thanks a lot.